Welcome to our party. My name is Peter Kahn. I teach in the English department at Penn, and today we are launching an extraordinary event about which I'm going to have a little more to say in a little while. Safe Kids Stories. But we're going to begin with a performance, I think that's the right word, by a remarkable young slam poet named Tahina Jabuan, who comes to us from Cristo Rey School, and who has a fan club here already, and I'm sure the rest of us will be part of it. She's going to start with a short slam poem.
Hello. If I sneeze, don't be caught off guard because I'm kind of sick. But I'm really happy to be here, and this poem is to bring awareness to immigrant children in different classroom settings. Things I wished I had the courage to say when I was 12. Like, you want to know something? Saying something slower will not make me understand it. It's like having your friends pick up some random dictionary word, have your neurons race to the meaning, then go back to set your mark go, because they didn't find any. Little girl who came up to me and told me that I was ugly. Well, I didn't know what ugly meant, but I went home and asked, and I am one word closer to speaking English, so joke's on you. Why do you have to tell me I have an accent like I don't already know? I can hear how my voice is not in harmony with everybody else's. Cacophony is too obvious. People come up to me and tell me so much about Haiti and the poverty, like it's everything that there is. Say more, it's not like I haven't lived there for 11 years. Hearing your homeland mentioned in class is the ultimate shout out you don't need. Like, I know where I'm from. I know you know where I'm from. Now let's please proceed. And after I learned the difference between kitchen and chicken, I got ambitious. So I auditioned for the role of Mary in the Stations of the Cross, and after I delivered my monologue all proud and pumped up, my teacher looks at me and says, "You have an accent, so you won't be getting the role." But I'm pretty sure Mary didn't speak English. So picking me is as closest to Mary you're gonna get. While this poem is an ode to the inferno feeling inferior brings, to know what it's like being lonely all the time, to home not being nowhere to be found, to my mother crying when she saw how emaciated my body has become. Well, Mom, you should see what it looks like up here. To schoolyards looking like prison ones, to not being able to escape the bullies at school because one of them lives with you, to finally learning that some people are sharper than their knives' edges, and they're attracted to my back like it has magnets. This poem is an ode to finally having friends, but not being able to talk much to them, to loving someone and not being able to tell them. I could tell you how much I love you in your own language, but I don't know how. Now I know how. Now I know how to stand firm without having to apologize, without sounding like the only empty chair in a crowded conference room, without being bashed as soon as I am done speaking. This is me here, to my 12-year-old self, to tell her that it does get better. This here is better. That your accent may not be as strong and memorable as it once was, but you are. Thank you.
I can't think of a better way to have started this program. I'm going to make a few remarks about the project, and then others more interesting than I will take over. But before I do, one last time, if I could encourage some of you to come forward. There are seats, or even on the floor, because people are going to try and come in, and it's going to get more and more awkward. And this is terrific. Okay. Safe Kids Stories. This project, this extremely important project, has been designed by my colleague and longtime friend, Lorraine Carey, a superb writer and a tireless activist on behalf of justice Could we salute Lorraine? Let me share with you Lorraine's vision for Safe Kids Stories. We, all of us involved in this project, want to rethink safety. Why? Because so much, too much is written about danger. Poverty, race, immigration, religion, region, all these affect the likelihood the children will experience danger. And childhood itself is vulnerable. These are urgent and real problems, but it's also urgent that we seek out ways to do better and to celebrate when we find those ways. We'll be using a wide range of contributors, from K-12 writers and college writers to professional journalists and artists. Safe Kids Stories will crowdsource deep cultural knowledge and care for kids to describe, report, and illustrate safety and the emotional and social conditions that foster safety. So you're going to be invited today, quite literally, to follow us, comment, share, send us your stories, and we will enlarge the community that sees safety for children, and actually for all of us, peace and nonviolence with the clarity and imagination which we so often devote to seeing danger. One way to follow us is through social media, and so the first thing I want to do is turn this mic over to Abby Cacho, who is going to give you some instructions that are beyond my technological capacities on how you can actually begin to join this conversation electronically right now.
Hello everyone, I'm Abby and I'm tonight's event producer. I'm in Professor Carey's class, English 135, Creative Nonfiction, essay blog tweet. So, the blog and the tweet you can help us out with. If you do have a blog or are already on medium.com, you can follow Safe Kids Stories on medium.com and join the conversation there. Twitter is also a very, very popular site. So you can join the tweets, live tweet, retweet, favorite the tweets, whatever you want to do with the tweets, just be active on the Twitter. So that's at Safe Kids Stories as well. And you can also use the hashtag #SafetyMeans. If you want to join the conversation by being part of the movement, you can take a picture after this event with Abigail and Jen, who would be in the back at 5:30, and just write down what safety means, and by taking a picture, you're giving us permission to put it on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And then you can also follow us on Instagram and repost as often as you'd like our photos, also at Safe Kids Stories. Thank you very much and enjoy.
This event would not be possible without the cooperation and contributions of all sorts of people, and it is absolutely imperative that I thank them. The first thanks goes to Aaron Levy, who is the director of this space, SLAUD, and who has been a wonderful and generous partner. If you noticed on the awning as you come in, the motto here is join the conversation, and that's what we're also attempting to do. The University of Pennsylvania Dining Service, believe it or not, deserves a shout out because they provided all the food in the other room. Cristo Rey High School sent us a wonderful slam poet. Kimmel Center and the CLEP Youth Jazz programs under the direction of Brent White will be performing later. Hip Hop Heritage After School program at Academy at Palumbo. Carnegie's After School program, the School of Social Policy and Practice at Penn, and especially Dean John Jackson, who is sort of our chair of the board, and our partner Tina Smith-Brown, the inventor of Letter to My Father. There's an announcement that I want to make, which is, as it were, just hot off the press. The Mural Arts program, which I assume you're virtually all of you familiar with, and its wonderful director Jane Golden, have announced that they're going to partner with the School District of Philadelphia, and through that partnership in art classes around the city, going to encourage students to create the logo for Safe Kids Stories. So we have an illustration, which I'll refer to later, but we're looking for a logo, and Jane Golden and the school district together are going to do that for us. Kathy Poole of the mural program is here, and we want to thank her for that. Among many other activities, we have an educational council that is forming, and there are going to be all sorts of events that are going to be open especially to teachers. Art Sanctuary Teaching Artists in February will host writers' workshops for parents and teachers to tell stories. In March, we're going to have a celebration of safety and health for children at the Kimmel Center with performances from local artists. In April, Pulitzer Prize-winning editorial cartoonist Signe Wilkinson and accomplished DC Comics and Marvel artist Eric Battle will be hosting workshops for children in both Camden and Philadelphia. This is a sample of Eric's extraordinary work. There will be all kinds of Facebook announcements, emails, tweets, and updates from Alair Wogemarth, our education program manager. And finally, you can email us at safekidstories@gmail. Now, we have a special treat. As all of you know, MK Asante has agreed to be with us today. It's a tremendous treat to have him here, and I'm going to have the privilege of introducing him briefly. Introductions are always interesting because, in fact, the person you came to see is him and not me. And so, if I can find my very brief sheet, I found it. You all know something about him, you may not know enough. MK Asante is a best-selling author, award-winning filmmaker, rapper, and professor at Morgan State University, where he has tenure, and has been called by CNN a master storyteller and a major creative force. He's the author of Buck, described by Maya Angelou as a story of surviving and thriving with passion, compassion, wit, and style. It was a Washington Post bestseller in 2014 and 2015, and is a NAACP Image Award finalist. He's got other books. It's Bigger Than Hip Hop, Beautiful and Ugly Too, a title I particularly enjoy, and Like Water Running Off My Back. He's a Sundance Feature Film Fellow for the movie adaptation of Buck. He directed the prize-winning Stars TV documentary, The Black Candle. Vibe magazine has called him the voice of a new generation. Essence describes him as brilliantly complex. He's been featured on CBS, NBC, the BBC, MTV, among other television outlets. He was selected as 100 History Makers in the Making by MSNBC. His essays have been published in USA Today, the New York Times, etc., etc. I give you MK Asante.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. How's everybody doing? Good. What's up, y'all? Good. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for everybody who organized this. I want to give a big shout out again to Lorraine Carey, whose Black Ice inspired me to write Buck and inspired me to be a writer. So let's give her a big hand. I want to thank Mr. Levy for running this space. I want to thank all the young people here, all the youth that came out, obviously the Slot Foundation, UPenn, everybody, and then just my city. I just got off a plane like a few minutes ago, you know what I mean, from the West Coast, and I'm going back to the West Coast tomorrow, but I felt like I had to come and do this, because everyone was like, you're going to fly from San Francisco to Philly and then get right back around and go back to LA. And I'm like, yeah, I have to. It's Philly, it's my heart, and I gotta be here. So thank y'all for coming out. Everything that's going on here, it means so much to me, it means so much to my story, my journey. I want to just talk a little bit about my book, my journey, and how it connects to everything we're doing here tonight with Safe Kids Stories. So my book is called Buck. Young Buck, Buck Wild, Buck Shots, Bucktown, Slave Buck, Black Buck, Make Buck, Buck Now. I wanted a title that was short, obviously, but also reflective of a long experience, you know, so Young Buck, that's what we called it, that's what they called me, growing up in uptown Philadelphia. They call me Young Buck. Buck Wild, that's kind of what happened in my story and my journey and losing control. Buck Shots, that refers to, you know, the violence that's destroying our communities, and that's why this is so important, right? That, you know, I saw people murdered and I saw people lose their life, so when I say Buck Shots, I'm talking about that. When I say Bucktown, I'm talking about the musicality of my life and my journey, the soundtrack, which is hip-hop. So Bucktown is an old school hip-hop reference. We say Slave Buck, Black Buck, and that's referring to the racism that once was, because, you know, buck used to be a derogatory term, you know, during slavery and things like that. They would say, we're selling this big black buck for sale. So buck is derogatory. So when I say black buck, slave buck. I'm talking about the racism that was, but also still exists today, obviously. We still have to say Black Lives Matter. We see what's going on. So that's still with us. I say make buck. I'm talking about entrepreneurship and just everybody in Philly has a hustle, can hustle, knows some kind of, has a couple different revenue streams or whatever. So when I say make buck, I'm talking about that form of education. And then I say buck now, and I'll come back to what buck now means for me, because that's kind of like really the most important part of the book. So I'll come back to that at the end. But that's what buck is. I wanted to also tell a story. I didn't want to write a story from me, the perspective now, looking back. I wanted to write a story from me, the perspective I was when I was young. So buck starts when I'm 13, it ends when I'm 18, and it's written in the first person present tense. You get to experience what I experienced, see what I saw, and kind of grow with me. It's so interesting that we're talking about safety and literature and narratives because, are we good? Oh, in the light. Okay, cool. Thank you. Well, that's so interesting because some of Buck is about being in the darkness, and then it's about how I came to the light. So it's like a metaphor going on right here. But you know, really, that is my journey. I came out of the darkness. So, you know, so I wanted to write a story that was first person present tense. I wanted to put you into it because just like wonderfully, Peter Kahn put it wonderfully, these issues are urgent. So when you read something in the first person present tense, there's a sense of urgency, there's a sense of immediacy there. I want to give you kind of a little taste of some of what's in Buck. And it opens up, I mean, in so many ways you can describe Buck. I usually describe Buck as a book about education. It's a book about education. It's a book about miseducation, about re-education, about street education, about self-education, and it's a book that talks about the differences and the distance and the similarities between school and education, right? So it differentiates the two, combines the two, talks about the two, but it's a book about education. But it's also a book about safety if you think about it, because in a lot of ways, we talk about going through that darkness, getting through that danger to get to somewhere safe. And so Buck starts out, the fall in Philadelphia. That's the opening line of Buck, right? So we're talking about safety, and this is the beginning of Buck. The fall in Philadelphia. Outside is the color of cornbread and blood. Change hangs in the air like the sneaks on the live wires behind my crib. Me and my big brother Uzi in the kitchen. He's rolling a blunt on top of the source. The one with Tyson on the cover, rocking a kufi, ice grilling through the gauze. Uzi can roll a blunt with his eyes closed. So in the beginning of the first paragraph of this book, I mean, we have the fall in Philadelphia. We've got live wires behind the crib. We got Mike Tyson. The danger is already palpable. You can already feel the environment. And so this whole thing about going towards safety is so important because ultimately that's where we go, right? You know, it's a funny thing. I said I was just in San Francisco, and I was working with juveniles the last 2 days. I've been in the juvenile system in Oakland and San Francisco. I've been working with young people, and we've been talking a lot about slang. They've been teaching me the California slang, the Oakland slang, and I've been teaching them a little bit about the Philly slang. One of the things I wanted to do in this book is introduce the world to kind of, not just the world that I grew up in, but also the language. I love language, I love words. So for example, in its opening scene, my brother, as I was mentioned, was, rolling up, and I say, at the end of that, I say, Uzi rolls another perfect blunt. John looks like a paintbrush. Now, everybody from Philly obviously knows the word John, but when I go around, you know, other places, people are like, what are you talking about, John? So I remember when I wrote this book, I sent it to my editor, and my editor's like, what's John? And I'm like, okay, I have to put a little line in here to kind of like explain it. So I'll tell you what I came up with. I said, another perfect blunt. John looks like a paintbrush. John could mean anything. Person, place, or thing. Sometimes if we're telling a story and we don't want people to know what we're talking about, we'll plug John in for everything. Yo, the other day I was at the John around the corner with the young John from down the street, right? We get to the John, right? And the boy at the door all in his John, not knowing I had that John on me, man. It was about to be on in that John. So, you know, it was so important to me when I learned about, well, you know, it's interesting. When I learned about, like, you know, I grew up in a household that was very Afrocentric, and one thing that was interesting to me, I just came back from Nigeria not too long ago, and I was actually just talking to my new young buck back there who's from Nigeria. We were talking about Yoruba culture, but what's interesting and fascinating to me about Nigeria is it's 400 languages spoken there, you know? And so you think that's just one country in Africa. And so when I think about like how black people got to this country, we think, you got to remember African people spoke so many different languages. It wasn't, Africa's not a country, it's a huge continent with so many languages. So when we got here, as African Americans, we didn't all speak English. We spoke all different languages, but we had to learn English. But then we had this paradox and complexity because the people that are teaching us the language are also the people that are having us enslaved, right? And so part of that safety that we're talking about here tonight is about language, right? Because what African Americans had to do is learn, what we say in Philly is freak the language. We had to learn how to use the same, that's why, back in the day, I'll give you an example, a funny example. So back in the day, you could have a situation where there are, let's say, a lot of enslaved Africans, and they're on a plantation. And then there's like some slave master somewhere, out of sight somewhere, right? And someone comes up and says, did you hear that MK escaped slavery? And they say, MK escaped slavery? That's a bad nigga. Now, the white slave owner that hears that is going to say, yes, that's a bad nigger because he escaped slavery. Yes, yes. Now, all the black people in the room, on the plantation know that when you say bad nigger, that you really are celebrating me, that I'm really a hero, and that it's not bad at all. And as soon as the slave master finally realizes that bad means good, then the slang changes, and it's some whole other new slang. And so that's been the journey. So for me, all of these language, all this stuff is very connected to our history, but it is about safety. It's about liberation. How can you get to safety and freedom without being able to freak the language, the narratives, the words? It's so important. So that's part of what I wanted to do in this book. But the book is not about that. The book is about my family and my journey toward education, my journey toward the blank page. The blank page saved me. America enraged me. Then that trick paid me. New slaves, old slavery. My grandma told me the streets far from holy. Now I'm lonely. My homies' bodies is holy. I wanted to talk about all the different challenges, writing a memoir so vulnerable. I said, young buck, buck wild, buck shots, bucktown, slave buck, black buck, make buck, buck now. But I didn't talk about the other buck, which is buck naked, And what I learned, so buck naked is interesting because when you write a memoir, Buck is my 4th book. And it's by far the most difficult, challenging, exhausting work that I've ever done, because when you write a memoir, you're essentially buck naked. You become, you're taking off all your clothes and you're just showing the world, and they can stare at you and look at you and analyze you, and that's what you do when you write a memoir in a lot of ways. And so oftentimes we're taught, and this relates to this whole notion of safety, we're taught from a young age that vulnerability, I gotta step into the light, vulnerability is weakness. We're taught that vulnerability is weakness. What I learned as a writer, writing a memoir, is that actually that vulnerability is my strength. It gave me tremendous power to be vulnerable in that way, and made me, I talk about in the book, I use a word called unfuckwittable. And that's what I feel like that vulnerability did for me, So in this book, we don't have a whole lot of time, so I'm going to kind of jump forward. But this book talks a lot about my struggles at home, my family struggles. My brother was incarcerated. My mom has severe mental health issues. Turbulent relationship with my father. All that's in the book. I talk about, getting kicked out of different schools, coming up, and just all these challenges. But I want to talk about the safety element. I want to talk about what saved me. I want to talk about the transformation. And so I want to jump way forward in the book. So I found myself at this alternative school, and this is when I'd already got in trouble in school, kicked out of schools, not really feeling education, or not feeling school, right? I don't think I knew what education was at the time, but I wasn't feeling school. And so my mom kind of begged me to get into this school. Said, would you go to school? If I find a school that would take you, will you go? I said, sure, Mom, I'll go if you find a school. So my mom found a school that would take me. And I get to the school, and it's a real weird place. I mean, to this day, some of the weirdest kids I've ever seen in my life. That's just being honest, One kid I walk in the door, he's banging his head against the wall, he's using his own blood to make a painting. I mean, this is, I was like, this is an alternative school? I'm not this damn alternative, you know what I mean? Take me to the pub. So anyway, but I stayed for my mom. And anyway, I'm in this class one day, and this teacher puts blank pieces of paper in front of everybody, and she says, okay, class, now write. And the whole class just starts scribbling fast, like reporters at a press conference. Everybody just writing. And I'm just chilling there, you know. And then the teacher comes up and she says, you know, write. What you want me to write? You know, now I'm kind of frustrated. What you want me to write? She says, write anything you want. And immediately in my mind, I just felt like she wasn't being genuine. You know, people say things like that all the time. Hey, how you doing, man? But they don't really want to know how you're doing. You know, like if you really told them what's going on and, you know, all the difficult, you know, they might not want to know all that. So people say things, oh, write what you want. But then when you really write what you want, it's not okay, right? And so that's what I felt at the time. And so I said, oh, okay, write whatever I want? Okay, cool. So I wrote Buck School without the B. So I wrote Buck School without the B, and she looks at it. And, you know, my whole plan was she was going to see the curse and flip out and kick me out of class, and I would go back to G-Town, and that would be that. But instead, she saw it, and she said, keep going. And I want to share with you some of the things that happened after that. I turned the page over. It's blank again. The blank page is the starter pistol that fires and triggers my mind to sprint. What will I write? What will I say? Will I say what I write what I say? Maybe something funny, something serious. Damn, what am I going to write about? Something about my family, something about Amir, Ryan. How will I start? Whose story will I tell? My story? Maybe something made up? What about a story about a boy from Philly? A lost boy who wants to find himself but doesn't know where to look. Who wants to tell his story but doesn't know where to begin or end. Who searches anyway and discovers something about himself, about the world. I stare at the blank page, an ocean of white, alive with possibility. I hear myself take a breath, then exhale deep like I just rose from underwater. It's like I'm at the free throw line again. Foul shots, like the game is on the line again. I remember something my pops told me. Shoot to make it. My hand is shaking now, trembling like it's freezing. And then it hits me, a silence louder than all the music I've ever heard in my life. All the light in the world in one beam before me. I grip the pen and something shoots down my spine, sits me straight up. The pen feels heavy like it's made of stone. At exactly which point do you start to realize that life without knowledge is death in disguise? I stare deep into the blank page and I see myself. I feel something I've never felt before. Purpose. I don't know what my exact purpose is yet, but I know it has something to do with this pen and this blank page. Shit, I am a blank page. Holding the pen this way, snug and firm in my fist, makes me feel like I can write my future, like I can spell out my destiny in sharp strokes. The blank page begs me to tell a story, dares me to tell one that's never been told before, and to tell it like it will never be told again. The blank page lights up a room in my heart that I didn't even know existed. So that's the moment for me. Thank you. That's the moment. That's one of the huge transitional moments in my life. And that moment, being a writer and liking to write. I would come to class early and I'd be writing. And the teacher was, when I first started, the teacher said, "Oh, you kind of like this writing thing, huh?" I mean, I was like, "It's all right, it's cool." I didn't want to be so enthusiastic yet. I wasn't comfortable. Again, safety, right? I didn't feel, again, that vulnerability. I didn't want to come into class and be like, "Oh my God, I love this stuff. Like, I want to write all day." I wasn't ready to. I was still had that shell, that tough exterior. So she's like, "You really like this?" And I'm like, "I mean, it's cool or whatever, So I continue to write, and then that leads to reading, right? I get a book, and I start reading, and I become a voracious reader because I feel like I missed out on all this time. And then I had another epiphany. I said, "Oh, now I see why reading was illegal for black people during slavery." I always used to hear that. Some of the old people would tell me, back in the day, reading used to be illegal, and that just never meant anything to me until I really started to think about the reality of that, right? The reality of reading being illegal. Like back in the day, what was your name again? I'm sorry. What was it? Chenoweth. Like, so back in the day, Chenoweth, we could be in jail or whatever. I come into jail, you like, Chenoweth's in there, with, she's like, what you in here for, MK? I'm like, I was on chapter 8, and they just bust in the door, you know what I mean? Like, it's so crazy to think about that. Back in the day, you could get booked for a book, Like, you could really do time for a book. If you're driving in a car, and you got books in the car, and the cops pull you over, gotta throw the books out the window, put the book in your butt crack, you know what I mean? Like, all of this stuff. And then somebody has to read that one day. But I had this amazing epiphany. Wow, now I see why reading was illegal. We sub-vocalize. We think in words, So if you limit someone's vocabulary, you're not just limiting their vocab, you're limiting their thoughts. They can't even think of freedom because they don't have the language to access that, right? So for me, this all became connected to my liberation, right? Words became emancipatory because the more words I know, I say in the book, my thoughts and my vocabulary grow together like the petals and stem of a flower, right? And so these things grow together, and all of a sudden, more words means more options means more choices means the ability to design my own reality and to be safe. Because in so many ways, like I said, this book is about a journey to safety, a journey to freedom, and to me, freedom and safety are really synonymous. It's the same, right? Freedom is safety, and that's why I talked about the analogy on the plantation, or whether we're talking about John. It's the freedom to express ourselves, and so I found myself through language, through words, through writing, through reading. And I totally 1,000,000% support what you guys are doing here because it worked for me, it saved me, and thank you. And I think we have like a little bit of time for what is it, Q&A? Okay.
Is that threw me up. Here's what I need to do with your cooperation.
Yes.
There is going to be some time for Q&A, but there's going to be another speaker between here and Q&A, and then I'm going to ask both of you to be willing to do some Q&A. And that next speaker, whom I am privileged to introduce, is Bill Hite.
Hey,
I could say all kinds of good things about Bill Hite, who's a good man, but for those of you who don't know, he's the superintendent of the Philadelphia public school system, and he's working hard to make those schools safer and better places for your children. Well, you're going to conspire?
The superintendent just asked me to do something, and I forgot about it. I didn't talk about what Buck Now meant and what that was about. I said I was going to come back to it. So there's a part of the book where I got arrested, and I'm in the 35th precinct, which is on Broad, down there near Broad and Alney. And I had another kind of epiphany, and I just want to read from that part really quick, and then I'll explain how that's connected to what Buck is truly about. So, I say, this is a chapter called The Kite. I say, decisions lead to options, options to choices, choices to freedom. We all design our own reality, write our own script, build our own house, or prison, or coffin. Me against law and order, my nickname was Milo, and I always thought that stood for Me Against Law and Order. That was the acronym I came up with. Me Against Law and Order is about being a true rebel, pushing against the grain, making my own path, bucking the stereotypes, bucking the traps, bucking the system. I think about this show I saw on the Nature Channel the other day about elephants, about how despite weighing up to 25,000 pounds and standing 13 feet tall, they can still be chained. How, I wondered? It starts when the elephants are babies. Someone puts a metal chain attached to a wooden peg nailed into the ground around the baby elephant's foot. The baby elephant struggles but fails to break free and learns at that very moment not to struggle. That struggle is useless. Later on, even when the elephant can easily break free, it doesn't. I look around the 35th precinct at all the sad, hard, gray, black faces and see nothing but elephants. So Buck Now is about bucking the traps, bucking the stereotypes, setting your own path. It's about being a true rebel. You know, before I was a rebel without a cause, without a purpose, and it's about taking that rebellious spirit, that energy of youth, and putting it into something positive and bucking, being Buck. That's what we're redefining what Buck is. So that's what Buck Now is. Thank you. Thanks so much.
I just want to repeat what I was saying before. I'm privileged to introduce Bill Hite, the superintendent of Philadelphia School.
Thank you. And how about it again for MK, Asante? This young brother is spectacular. And I was just standing in the back and wasn't trying, and I was, my first horror was that I had to follow you. Right? But the second thing was I was just thinking about all of the individuals that I need you to talk with, individuals who are interacting with young people every single day in our schools, our principals, our teachers, our students. You have such a message to communicate to individuals, so we'll talk about that more. But I'm delighted to be here. And Laureen, thank you once again. Thank you for creating this space. And absolutely. I plan to be very brief, and one thing that I was late getting here, my apologies, because naturally I was supposed to go in front of MK, would have preferred to do that, but I was trying to make buck for the school district of Philadelphia, and we got 25 million released earlier today from City Council, so we were making buck. And I didn't know what buck now meant, but we were trying to do it now. That's right, so thank you. And just the other thing, thank you in the book, because I had the opportunity to go through your book, and thank you for explaining John, and because I needed to understand that, and so I'm gonna try that. That John was nice, indeed. So thank you. But here, this is why I'm here, and I think the safety thing is really important because, as Lorraine has talked about, and we've tried to do a lot of work where we're trying to not have a conversation about our young people from a deficit mindset. And so where we always talk about what they can't do, what they don't have, how bad their behavior will be, we have to stop that. And because we have to begin talking about what we expect, what they're capable of doing, and MK just showed us what every single young person, at least that I've met in the 4 years I've been here in Philadelphia, is capable of. And we have to start talking about it, and that's why I'm so thrilled that we're doing this work, because we're highlighting the tremendous things that young people are doing each and every day. And through the opportunity to highlight those things, then we're creating that safe space, we hope, for more children to then jump into that space as well. So I want to thank Laureen for the tremendous work that you have done in pulling this together. I think this notion of safe kid stories is where we have to go. And it is all about creating that space. The last thing I will end on is something that you just remind me of, MK. So the whole notion of alternative. And I think about, if we think about alternatives as an option for young people, but just the name in and of itself communicates a deficit. So in other words, it has to be something else. But what if we thought about it as an opportunity, and thinking about the types of opportunities that allows us to respond to what the learner or what the student needs. And if we think about it more from the perspective of opportunity, now we're already beginning to change the conversation about what we can expose our young people to. So I thank you. I thank all of you for illuminating these stories of our young people, because their work is critically important. Now, a few other people, I'm pretty sure that Dr. Carey has acknowledged these individuals, but there's a few people I want to acknowledge, individuals who have helped us create and continue to create these safe environments. We have Jody Greenblatt, who's leading that work for us. Jody, thank you for all of the work that you've done. And Karen Lynch, who is in the back, I was just standing beside her, and she's also leading that work as well. And then all of the other staff members from the School District of Philadelphia, and then everyone else who has become a part of creating these opportunities for our young people. So once again, thank you, and I'm looking forward to the question and answer session with MK.
Thank you. Once again, am I on? Good. Thank you. We do have a couple of minutes, and MK has agreed to come back and stand in the light. And stand in the light, because that's where he is now, for a few minutes of question and answer before we wrap up. I'll let you handle it yourself.
Okay, cool. All right. Ready? Any questions, comments, thoughts? Yes.
Yeah, so I have a question for you. So your book has been out. So your book has been out for several years now. And
Several? Hold on. What do you define as several?
No, it's so you had to tell it at several speaking arrangements, just your story and whatnot. And I'm wondering if your understanding of your story has changed over ever since you've released it. Yeah, I guess that's essentially the question.
Okay. Well, the book came out 2013. Paperback came out 2014. So I still feel like it just came out. You know, and with books, it's the push is so much harder. So it still feels new to me. But in terms of, you know, and I've done hundreds of engagements since then. The story hasn't. My story, I don't feel like it's changed. But what has changed is my understanding. You know, Dr. Maya Angelou, Auntie Maya was my mentor. And the last time I saw Auntie Maya, I was working on Buck, and I was very, very lost. And I was sitting there with her, and we were talking about other things, and we were doing other things. I was in Winston-Salem at her house. And then it just occurred to me, I should ask her for help. I mean, who else would you ask for help about writing a memoir than, you know, Auntie Maya Angelou? So I said, Auntie Maya, I got this memoir, and at this point, I thought, I was stuck. And I said, you know, Auntie Maya, I got this memoir, I got this deal, they're expecting me to, you know, deliver, and I don't know what to do. What's your advice? And she said, tell the truth. She said, if you tell the truth, then it's going to connect with somebody randomly in Iowa and India and Philadelphia and LA. It's going to connect with the world because the truth, right? How you felt, what you went through, what you saw, those things are universal, right? These are things that we all are going through, right? We all are going through trying to find our purpose. We all are struggling with depression or mental health issues. We all are struggling with not fitting in or not getting the right education. All of these things are universal. She said, just tell the truth. And so what I found is that whether I'm on Harvard's campus or whether I'm at the San Joaquin Juvenile Correction Facility, the truth is universal. The relationship to the themes and the ideas that I'm talking about is universal throughout. So my story, I don't feel like my story has changed, but I feel like I've gained an appreciation for how much my story is in everybody else's story, and vice versa. So not only, I thought at one point I was telling my story, and what I realized is I was telling our story. So that's the change. Thank you. Yeah. Oh. See, I'm desensitized. I didn't even hear it. Yes.
So I'm from Baltimore. Actually, I went to City, so a lot of my classmates are your students now.
Oh, where?
But when I was in Baltimore, I thought a lot about. I thought one of the biggest concerns that students face was school safety, which it comes from any number of things. But how similar do you feel as someone who grew up in Philly but now lives in Baltimore and teaches at Morgan in East Baltimore? How similar do you feel, the tactics we can use to make safe spaces for kids are? Like Baltimore, Philly, are they totally separate? Can we use some of the same tactics?
Yeah, I think we can use some of the same tactics. I mean, I think Baltimore and Philly are very connected. You know, yes, I'm from Philly, and I love Philly so much, and I live in Baltimore, and I live in North Carolina now. But being in Baltimore, I always kind of felt like Baltimore's like a cousin of Philly. You know what I mean? Like first cousin. You know, is it? You know, first cousin that's a little bit younger. You know what I mean? A little bit smaller. You know what I'm saying? Can't do everything you can do, but it's still your cousin. You know what I'm saying? And so. That's kind of how I feel about Be More. But in terms of like the tactic, so there's a Korean proverb that says, you know, study the hole to carve the peg. And I always loved that proverb. One time I was going to do work in Malawi, in Southern Africa, and before we left, the people who I was going with, they had all these plans, like what we were going to do. And then I asked them, like, well, have you been over there yet? And they were like, no, we've never been there. Like, we don't know anybody there. Like, but this is what we're going to do. And I was like, well, maybe we could, like, ask the people what they need, and then, like, we could figure out. And so we ended up doing that, and it worked a lot better because what we thought they needed wasn't what they needed. They needed something completely different. So in some ways, sure, this concept and this idea is definitely transferable all across the world. So that's not a question. But in terms of like the specifics, I think we always have to like see what the community actually needs and wants, and then adjust. So study the hole to carve the peg, and not just carving the peg based on kind of a general idea of what the hole is.
All right, I want to thank you. And at this point, we're going to give it up again for
All right.
MK Asante.
Thank you so much. I'm going to be signing books back there, so you can ask your question back there again.
Now, before we close out, we've got a wonderful opportunity here. Why don't you guys start setting up? We have they've agreed to come. A jazz ensemble, the Kimmel Clef Club Youth Jazz Ensemble, is going to close us out. After they have performed for us and gotten us through the end of the program, MK just mentioned that outside, you've seen it when you came in, as a table with